Hi friends, Krista here. Thank you so much for stopping by Books and Jams. Today we're going to be talking about reading outside of your comfort zone. And one thing that has helped me to read outside of my comfort zone has been Book of the Month. And I'm very thankful to Book of the Month for sponsoring this video. I have been a member of the book subscription service Book of the Month for off and on since I started my channel in 2016. I have absolutely loved this service and I'm very excited to tell you about it today. With Book of the Month, you get to choose the book that you're getting every single month. You can choose from their wide selection of diverse and debut and popular authors and choose which book you want, as well as there's often every month, as well as from some add-ons that they have every month. And then the book gets sent to you in a very fun, bright blue box that every time it shows up at my door, I get so excited. So every month your book will come in a blue box. It will also come with a fun bookmark, a super sturdy bookmark that says Book of the Month, and then it has a fun quote. This one said, "Life is hard, covers." And I'm going to show you the choices for November, and you can see what a wide variety of choices they have every single month. This month, the book that I picked is a romance called How to Marry Keanu Reeves in 90 Days by K.M. Jackson. In this one, we follow Lou, who is so upset when she hears that the famous actor Keanu Reeves is going to tie the knot. She is convinced that she is the one for Keanu and he should not be marrying this other woman. So her ride or die BFF hops in a car with her, and True and Lou travel cross country to stop Keanu Reeves from getting married and to profess her dying love for him. It just sounds like a fun romp. I love a road trip and it's a fun romance. And so that would be my pick for November. But there are also some other very interesting choices this month. We have A Little Hope by Ethan Joella. This is a shorter little contemporary debut author who is writing about a small town in Connecticut and the trials and the community that's there. Each chapter is kind of like a little short story that will connect these characters and the struggles that they go through and how this community comes together. Sounds really interesting. We also have a YA fantasy called The Keeper of Night by Kylie Lee Baker. In this one, Wren is a reaper. She has been collecting souls off the streets of London for centuries. Something happens that forces Wren to flee London. She accepts a challenge to fight off some demons so that she can take her place by the Goddess of Death's side and earn her rightful spot. It's probably not the choice for me, but I know many of you who would love some YA fantasy, and I love that it's a choice that would be out of my comfort zone. You guys know I love some historical fiction, and the historical fiction choice this month also sounds pretty interesting to me. It's The Family by Naomi Krupitsky, and in this one we follow two friends who are part of an Italian mob family. Their fathers are both members of the Italian mafia, and every Sunday, all of the family gets together and has dinner together. But something happens where one of the fathers kind of expresses a desire to leave the business, the family business, and it puts a wedge in between this friendship of these two girls. But we follow them through decades and how these decisions when they were children affect them as they grow up. I am very interested in this mid-century Brooklyn historical fiction. And the final main choice for November is called The Collective. This is a thriller by Alison Gaylin. No killer goes unpunished, it says here. In this one, we follow Camille, who is an angry, grieving mother. Something happened to her daughter, and she becomes almost obsessed with this young man who she thinks is the one who did it. In her grief and anger, she gets caught up with this group of women called The Collective, who are all angry, hurting mothers who decide to take vengeance into their own hands. And so this is a thriller for all of my thriller friends out there that maybe this would be the pick that you would have for the month of November. Every month there's also some add-ons. So in addition to those 5 fantastic choices, there is a handful of other choices that you could choose from. So you could add to your box maybe the memoir Will by Will Smith. That's just the story of his life. I'm so interested in reading this one. I have been following Will's career since The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and I would love to read his story in his own words. That just sounds fantastic. And another add-on in November is My Body by Emily Ratajkowski. Emily is an acclaimed model and actor, and in this collection of essays, she's exploring feminism and sexuality and a female body and how it's viewed in culture and in the world and in entertainment and all of these things. So this is a nonfiction collection of essays. One more awesome thing about Book of the Month is that if you're not really feeling any of the books that they have on the list for the month, you have the option of skipping a month. It will just roll over till the next month and you can just skip a month. So I love that wiggle room. Number one, you're choosing your own book. Number two, you can skip if you don't want it. Number three, you can add on extras. You can put up to 3 books in your box every month, which is fantastic. If you are interested in trying out Book of the Month, I do have a link down below and you can use the word cozy to get your first box for just $9.99. It's a fabulous deal for new release hardcover books that can help you to step outside of your comfort zone or be in your comfort zone. They have options that can fit for everybody. Thank you so much to Book of the Month for sponsoring this video. I am just a huge fan. So I hope you guys do check it out. I want to spend a couple more minutes just talking about some other books that have been a little bit outside of my comfort zone that I've ended up loving. So I have 4 books and a series here that I'm going to talk about. Since it is Nonfiction November, I'm going to start with my 2 nonfiction choices in this pile. I would say that my comfort zone in nonfiction is memoir. I don't read a ton of nonfiction, but when I do reach for nonfiction, it's probably going to be a memoir. But I have 2 books here that have been at the very top of my reading best of the year lists when the years that I read them. They're both still very fresh on my mind. But one of them is Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. This is a story of justice and redemption. Bryan Stevenson is a lawyer. He created the Equal Justice Initiative, which is a nonprofit that works with death row inmates who have been wrongfully convicted and helps them to get out of jail. And I was so moved and incredibly challenged by this book. I think it made me feel all the emotions and was so enlightening and informative and easy to read. I always think nonfiction is going to be difficult to read, but this one was not. But this definitely made a huge impact on my life and was my favorite book, I think, in 2019. So good. Another nonfiction that's not a memoir is Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. This one talks about the process of aging and death in the United States and how our culture kind of doesn't honor our elderly ultimately and doesn't give them a choice. And this just talks about illness, medicine, and what matters in the end. I think that this is a fantastic book for anybody who is walking through that stage of life with loved ones. It gives such good questions to ask about what is important and what matters to these wonderful people in our lives who shouldn't just be shoved into a nursing home and forgotten about, which is sadly what happens to so many. So I just thought that this book was also very informative and inspiring. I loved it. And I would not say that those were in my comfort zone whatsoever. Another book that was not in my comfort zone that I actually was pretty against reading. My comfort zone in reading is a book with a strong plot. I like the action to be moving forward. If somebody describes a book as being character driven, I'm probably not very eager to pick it up. However, I decided to give it a shot with this one, and it is A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. I absolutely fell in love with Count Rostov, who is the main character in this book. And this is most definitely a character-driven book because Count Rostov is sentenced to life in the Metropole Hotel, which is in Moscow. And he is not allowed to leave the hotel. So not very much happens. We follow the Count and his interactions and relationships with other people who come and go in the hotel. And he's just such a lovely character, and I just fell in love with him. And therefore, I think if that is the case, I could do character-driven books if I love the characters that are involved. But that is certainly what happened with this one. It was definitely out of my comfort zone, and I'm so glad that I decided to give it a try. Wonderful. I would never say that Stephen King was my comfort zone. Ever. I traumatized myself when I was young by reading some Stephen King books that I really should not have. So I have avoided him like the plague. However, I did decide last year to pick up 11/22/63 by Stephen King. It's massive. First of all, that's not my comfort zone. I don't typically read books that are quite so big. But I did buddy read this with Rainy from Rainy Day Reads, and I think that helped immensely. And I had heard enough people say that this is a little bit different from some of his other books. The horror element is not really a part of this, but it does have time travel, which is some sci-fi, which I don't always read. It is huge, and it does get pretty brutal a couple times. So it does have some of those Stephen King elements in it, but I'm so glad that I read this book, and I really did enjoy the reading experience, and I never thought I would. Never thought I would. And the final one that I have read that I want to talk about is a high fantasy. I guess you would call it high fantasy. Those of you who read a lot of fantasy, maybe it's not high fantasy, but I did pick up the Mistborn series over the last few years, and I read some fantasy, but most of the fantasy that I read is YA fantasy, but I did decide to give the Mistborn trilogy a try, and I'm so glad that I did. Because I really loved it, and now I want to read more from Sanderson. And following this one, I decided to pick up Robin Hobb and have read the Farseer trilogy, which I really enjoyed and want to read more from her as well. So I feel like these have opened my eyes. I feel like all 5 of these have opened my eyes to these genres and types of books that I'm willing to read outside of my comfort zone. I think if you were to ask me, my comfort zone would be historical fiction and middle grade. That is my safe, sweet spot. I love it. Those are the books that I'm going to reach for first. But it is fun every once in a while to push that comfort zone a little bit and see if you won't be surprised. I think it's really healthy in my reading to read outside of that comfort zone, read from different types of people, different cultures, just to read from people whose life experience is very different from my own and see if I won't be surprised. And finally, I have one stack of TBR Book of the Month books. These are all in different genres, and I'm just going to go through them very quickly, but these are on my Book of the Month shelf, and they are books that I definitely want to read. The first one is in my sweet spot. It's historical fiction, Sisters in Arms by Kaya Alderson. I'm really excited to read this one, but it's in my comfort zone. So, of course, I'm excited to read that one. But then we have some literary fiction, which often I feel like is going to go over my head. This is We Are the Brennans by Tracy Lange, and I think it's a kind of a contemporary, but it is definitely more literary than I normally would read. So hopefully, I'm hopeful with all of these that I'm going to love them. We shall see. I have a romance, The Two Lives of Lydia Bird by Josie Silver. I am really excited to read this. It has kind of a sliding doors type trope in it, and I'm really excited for that. But romance is not my go-to all the time. Every once in a while. I would say that I try to read pretty eclectically. I have a YA fantasy here, The Song of the Crimson Flower by Julie C. Dow. I have a thriller, Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. Everyone has loved this. I'm scared of it, but I'm going to read it one of these days. I have another kind of sci-fi type book, The City We Became. This might be considered fantasy by N.K. Jemisin. The 5 boroughs of New York City are personified in this book. And I just, that whole idea intrigues me. And then finally, I have another nonfiction that's not a memoir. I have Cast, The Origins of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. I've heard so much praise for this one that I just want to give it a try, even though it's a little bit out of my comfort zone. So I would love to hear from you down below. Do you read out of your comfort zone on purpose? Do you do it every once in a while by accident? Have you been surprised with a book that you loved that was out of your comfort zone? Let's chat down in the comments below. You guys know I love talking with you down there. Be sure also to check out my link for Book of the Month. I would love for you to sign up and give it a try for a couple months. And that is going to be it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here, and I will talk to you in another video very soon. Bye.